in the first community I want to talk a little bit about, just comment about, is Carcross. And I always, and the other, of course, is Hobbema. And these two communities had a real impact in my life, not only as a person, but also as a police officer. I always credit Carcross for in many ways giving me that awakening in terms of what justice should look like. I think every police officer throughout their career comes to a certain point where what they're doing doesn't seem to be working, and they're looking for something else. And Carcross taught me that in a number of different ways. They taught me that policing perhaps, or challenged my thought processes about the traditional forms of policing in terms of what we knew as police officers when we went through depot and through training and so forth. It reminded me of a story when I was in Carcross, and it was kind of a bit of one of those aha moments or life-changing experiences. And it was when I was involved in a circle sentencing, and I didn't really understand, I think, at that moment in time, the strength in the circle process, the strength in traditional forms of justice. And I can remember sitting there, and there was a gentleman seated there that they were considering whether or not they should send him to jail or whether or not continue with probation and so forth. And we were discussing the event and the thing that had taken place and the impact that had on people. And I'm not sure how many of you have been involved in a circle, but it can be a very emotional experience. And this one especially so because of the circumstances that surrounded it. And I was a big part of that event, because I ended up having to, I had an altercation with this individual. I ended up having to arrest them, and we're down on the ground in a Donnybrook and so forth. So it did have a significant impact on me. But this was my first experience with circle sentencing, and I remember watching as the feather went around, and everybody spoke about how this had impacted them. And as the feather went around, people were quite emotional, and people, began to express their emotions and were crying and so forth. And I was sitting there in uniform, and I can remember seeing that feather come closer and closer, and I kept thinking to myself, somebody's got to show some decorum here. My goodness, everybody's breaking down. So I was watching this feather come closer and closer and go to the next person. I was trying to think, okay, what am I going to say? What am I going to do? First, I can't cry. That's one thing I can't do. Well, I went to the next person and the next person, and Harold Gattensby happened to be the one individual that was sitting there, and I was sitting just two from Harold, and went through to Harold and went to the next person and so forth, and then I ended up. I could see the person right beside me talking about the impact with them, and I said, okay, well, I'm there. I'm feeling strong. Well, it wasn't the moment that I touched that feather that I just broke down. And it was such an emotional moment for me, because I think it was one of those moments of realization that those are powerful processes, and those are important processes to our communities. And as I said, it really challenged my perspectives of what policing is, my perspective of my role as a police officer, as a First Nations person in those communities. And it also helped me get in touch with my humanity as a police officer. And that was probably the most critical thing and the most important thing, because I think we as police officers sometimes have a tendency of hardening ourselves to what exists in around us, and there's nothing wrong with periodically showing a bit of emotion. The other is, and I just want to call it is Hobbema. For me, I think that was one of my life-changing experiences, because it taught me the importance of, and I see some people from Hobbema here, it taught me the importance of spirit. And I remember when we had a number of drive-bys in Hobbema, and I was really struggling within myself. Here I'm the OIC, I'm an Aboriginal person, and there's certain expectations that perhaps I can do something differently. I knew the problem was much bigger than the police, of course, but I thought at the very least I could at least try and provide the community some level of safety. And I remember really struggling whether or not I would actually be able to do anything in this community. And remember talking to Jim, and Jim talked about his time when he went to communities that were, I guess, communities that were in crisis or struggling, and he talked about taking tobacco and making an offering and asking for the way and asking for assistance. And so I thought about that, and I talked to an individual in the community that I hold in very high regard. And he took me to a Sundance where I asked for help. I believe one of the strongest things that any leader can have is humility enough to know you don't know the answers, and vulnerable enough to ask for help. And I had to ask for help in this circumstance. So we went to the Sundance and offered tobacco. And I have to say, from that day forward, things started to happen. And one of those things that happened is we talked about getting cadet corps going. And I think one of the things that recognizing spirit did is it brought me somebody like Mark Linnell here, who now has probably the largest cadet corps in the country of 1,000 registered kids.